To continue our series on Osawatomie, I want to look at a little bit of the history of Osawatomie this episode, and I have a really interesting guest who's kind of on the fringes of Osawatomie, and I'm excited to see what he has to say and to get to learn a little bit more about this individual. Uh, as soon as Zoom figures itself out, we have Ambassador Sam Brownback. Let's see if this thing gets going here. This is too cool.
Hi, this is Sam.
Hey, Ambassador Brownback, this is Dave Stevens. Nice to meet you.
Oh, good to meet you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Can you hear me just fine?
I can hear you just fine. Yeah, I've got to lighten my screen up, though I can barely see you. For some reason, my screen has gone really dark on me.
Uh-oh.
So if you give me a second to figure this out.
I figured my personality would be bright enough that you could see me through any of that.
Well, probably is, but I'd like to see you brighter anyway.
Sure.
Let's see here.
That's too funny.
Well, it's just gonna have to work. We'll just make it work.
Oh, I'm really sorry about that. Well, I can see you great.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, it'll work. It'll work.
So let me give you just a little brief background on how you and I have got to be here. Okay. This summer, I tasked myself with learning more about the city of Osawatomie, Kansas. I grew up in Houston. I spent a few years in Kansas City, and 7 years ago, I got an opportunity to move to Osawatomie, Kansas, and I am a high school math teacher at Osawatomie High School.
Way to go.
Thank you. And I've been here 7 years, and I just haven't ingrained myself in the community quite the way I'd like to. And I know just how rich the history is here. So I decided to start a podcast and just go introduce myself to people. And along that journey, within 2 days, I met a lady by the name of Anna Lee Billum.
Oh, yeah. That's my good friend.
Exactly. And Anna Lee, after talking with her for several hours, learning about her story, and she's the class of 1950. She's the class secretary or president or something. Well, she's kept that group together. She's been the glue for that group and really for a lot of generations of Osawatomie graduates for years. And she kept talking about, and this is my dear friend so-and-so. I talked to her yesterday, and her son did pretty good. She was, just like bragging about her good friend's kids. And it didn't register the first 3 or 4 times. And then she goes, yeah, I was talking to Sam Brownback yesterday. And I was like, wait, you mean the former governor and the ambassador, Sam Brownback? And she goes, yes. His mom graduated from Osawatomie High School in 1950.
Yes.
That's our connection, and that's how we got here. And so this is a podcast dedicated to learning more about the city of Osawatomie, and I am really curious to hear some of the insights and stories that you might have from your mom and your mom's side about your time here in Osawatomie.
Well, I'd love to give that. And thank you for somebody from outside, from Houston and Kansas City, taking an interest in the community. And it has a rich, really a phenomenal history. Osawatomie's is. I mean, it's the start of the Civil War. Yeah. It's where John Brown says there will not be peace in this land until the issue of slavery is resolved. It's where the Battle of Osawatomie takes place and Brown loses one of his sons. It's when the slavery is ended, it becomes one of the pillar communities of Kansas, of the Free State. Topeka, Lawrence are kind of, they're okay. Because Kansas before then was pretty divided. There was pro-slavery communities in the state. There was anti-slavery communities in the state, and they were fighting with each other. And Osawatomie was really one of the pillars of the freedom, the anti-slavery movement. So the place has really an amazing place in U.S. history, and much of it's tied to the issue of slavery and John Brown.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say it in the way that you say that there will not be peace in this land until the issue of slavery has been resolved. And it's that it's just it's an issue that was punted over and over and over and over. And it took the will of that man to kind of say, wake up, it's time. And to do it here, Osawatomie of all places, just it kind of blows your mind when you think about it.
Yeah, but that's actually kind of the role of Kansas writ large. Kansas is one of these states that, I mean, it's rectangular shape in the middle of the country without mountain or ocean.
Yeah.
We got Mount Sunflower,
Okay.
but and you kind of look at, but yet you've got all this outsized history that happens in the place. I mean, the battle about slavery, and even before that, Coronado comes up here. You've got the first Christian martyr in the United States happens in Kansas around 1548. You've got, really the Prohibition movement. It galvanizes in Kansas, and it's an amazing piece of history to change the U.S. Constitution to end drinking.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Because you got to get 2/3 of the House and the Senate and 3/4 of the states to agree to this, and they did.
That which is crazy, because that might be the one universal thing. Everybody's like, yeah, we could have a beer. Like if there's one thing everybody would be able to agree on, let's just go, let's have a beer and relax, So that's crazy to get that many people to agree to it.
Yeah, because you had this really rot gut alcohol at the time that was killing mostly men.
Yeah.
And so it was they called themselves the Home Defenders Movement. And it was mostly women that were saying, we've got to stop our husbands and brothers and sons from getting killed by this alcohol, because it was killing them. It was just, and so that really galvanized the movement. Medicine Lodge, Kansas, a little bitty town too. And
what else? I'm trying to think, because I feel like there's more than just that. There's so much more that Kansas was kind of on the spear tip of. There's some other things that Kansas is like I feel like we're limited there with what we've talked about already, but it just seems over and over what I'm finding is that Kansas kind of has these kind of organic way of having these I don't want to say hot button or hot topic issues, but like slavery obviously, but it's kind of at the spear tip of a lot of things.
It is, and you're kind of looking at it. Why Kansas? Why would this be? And yet it's one of really two states after the original colonies that's settled in no small part by people of faith, really conviction.
Mm-hmm.
Utah, I look at as being the two states that, because when the slavery issue was being decided, it was, a sovereign, it was going to be local sovereignty, and they were going to let people vote. And Nebraska is supposed to be a free state. Kansas is supposed to be a slave state. Well, then a bunch of basically Christians out of the Northeast, a lot of them out of Massachusetts and a number of them out of Ohio, moved to Kansas. They say, we're not going to let this place be a slave state. So
what kind of character do you think it takes to do that? Because I've talked to somebody, the local historian Grady Atwater, I talked to him about it. And he talked about those people from Massachusetts, the companies that would send groups of people here, and in coming to Kansas, knowing that you are going to most likely be under attack.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of character do you think that takes to take your wife and your kids into a hostile environment like that?
I think it takes is a real conviction of the heart. And these are primarily committed Christians. I've read some of their letters that they sent home. They are run by their faith.
Yeah.
And they just looked at it and they just said, slavery is wrong. Yeah. And we're going to fight. And before, like you said, we'd punted the issue of slavery for 150 years, and we'd kind of go, yeah, it's bad, but I don't want to get in a fight about it. I'm opposed to it, but let's just, and the people that came here to Kansas going, slavery's bad, it's wrong, and I'm willing to fight about it.
Right.
That was the difference. And I think that's the Kansas character. But, it's not you've got to temper that definition with, I'm willing to fight about it, but I'm going to fight calmly. Dwight Eisenhower was the prototypical Kansan.
Yeah.
So here's a warrior, but he comes across as this kind of avuncular uncle figure.
Yeah.
He's just kind of a calm.
I didn't think about that.
And his mother was a pacifist. They were river brethren. And you're looking at, and so she was not happy her son was a general, even though he was an Allied commander of the largest invading force in the history of world history.
Right.
But it's this sort of calm sureness that we're right and we're going to fight about it. And we don't want to fight, but if that's what it takes, we will do it.
So that then really permeates the entire United States psyche, doesn't it? I mean, because what you're saying, that it's that is that calm confidence, and no, we don't want to fight, but we will. That is really fascinating, because that's that speaks to what I've always felt was the way we are, the way Americans are. In general, we don't want to pick the fight. We're not out, trying to go fight Canada, like we're not, that's not what we're here for. But, when we need to stand up for our convictions, we will, and we're going to do it to the end.
Yeah, that's basically it. I don't want to fight, but if you're going to make me fight and it's a core moral issue, I will fight. Ronald Reagan, when he really took on the Soviet Union, notice how he did it. He called it an evil empire.
Right.
And then a big part of his examples were about the Jewish refuseniks and the evangelicals who were not allowed to practice their faith. They weren't allowed to emigrate to Israel. And I think that's how you get to the American public. Is most of the public would say they may be religious, they may not, but they believe in the right to pick your own faith and to be able to decide, I want to be this, or I want to be that, or I don't want to be anything.
Right.
But you've got the right. But now if a country is telling you you can't do that, then it just strikes them as a righteous indignation, saying you're denying a person's right to do with their own soul what they see fit. This person wants to be Jewish. They want to go to Israel. You should let them.
Right.
You're not going to let them. I'm upset about it. And it was really part of how Reagan kind of sold the evil empire and put us into a much more confrontational position with the Soviet Union that ended up bringing them down instead of just, the détente that, well, let's live and let live. You go on, we'll go on. And he got to the point, no, this is evil. And they're denying too many people their rights. And that's how he appealed to the American public.
Right. Interesting. All right. So you grew up in Garnett, or born in Garnett, which is just south of Osawatomie, right?
Yeah.
And I really kind of want to skip right over your high school years, because you went to how does it, like Prairie View? I don't know if I'm saying it right, but they don't really matter. The only thing great about Prairie View is that whenever Osawatomie plays Prairie View, it's like Christmas, because it's red and green on the field. Otherwise, yeah. All right. So when you were in high school, I read this. I don't know. I want to hear your side. You were involved in FFA. Is that right?
I was.
Yeah. Can you speak to that experience? What lessons did you learn about yourself, maybe about life? What did FFA provide to you as as an experience?
It was really my door to the world. FFA ended up being that. I had a great high school ag teacher, Gary Harvey. I'm born on a farm in Parker, Kansas. We go to Kansas City, take our livestock, but I'm happy being a farmer there. But it was like the FFA started me on leadership training, and it took me to state conventions, and I was elected state president of Future Farmers, and I met a congressman.
Oh, cool.
And I'd never met a congressman before. They don't come to Parker.
Right.
and my family wasn't politically active, and but I met one. I go, wow, that's a great job. I wonder how you get work like that.
Yeah.
And so it really, the FFA gave me my entree to a much broader world, that, then once I got into, oh wow, that's pretty interesting. And you get to see these things that I wouldn't have had exposure to otherwise.
Yeah. And then after high school, you went to K-State, and then you went to KU and got I was reading this, it says a JD, and I was like, what, a jurisdictional doctorate? So you basically have your doctorate in law from
Yeah,
KU, is that right?
that's correct.
Yeah. So now you went to both schools.
Yeah.
You went to both schools. So in my imagination, so knowing what I know about Kansas and knowing what I know, during football season, you wear purple and you're rooting for the Wildcats. And then during basketball season, you're a Jayhawk. Is that right?
No,
What?
I'm purple.
Okay. Okay.
You really go with where your undergrad. That's where your heart is.
That's fair. I'm all right with that.
President at K-State, and I had a friend of mine a guy I knew in Texas that went to Texas A&M undergrad and UT to law school, and I said, I thought that was unconstitutional in Texas.
Right.
And he said, well, I consider it that I got my education at A&M and I went to trade school at UT.
Oh, wow.
So I thought,
that's fighting words.
Good.
Those are fighting words.
I could handle it that way. So I mean, I needed a law degree. I wanted to practice law. Or actually, what I wanted to do was go home and farm and practice law to support my farming habit. But that didn't work out.
Farming habit.
So
now, do you know how to take apart a diesel engine?
No.
Could you fix it? See, I feel like a good Kansas farmer knows the ins and outs of a diesel engine.
My nephew that runs much of the farm now does.
Okay.
My dad was not a mechanic. He was really a farmer. And so when we got into anything that was complicated at all, we had to take it into the shop.
Okay. Yeah, because from what I've learned living out here for the last 7 years is that farming is not plant a seed, raise a crop, cut it down, and sell it to the guy. That's not that. It is so much more complicated than that, and there's so much more complex than that, and some of the most richest stories of like ingenuity and being able to fix any problem at any time, and just I'm always forever going to look up to the farmers because of what they're able to do and how they're able to come. I can't change my oil. I seriously, I don't know much about what's going on underneath the hood of a car. I probably don't even know how to open the hood to my car. Right. So I have so much respect for a farmer to have so many different types of jobs and to be able to handle all those situations is impressive.
I'm with you. And the technology now in agriculture is so much that and it's just not one field. It's just not the computer. It's the genetics, it's the biology, it's the atmosphere. You're looking at all these really high tech pieces to the system that makes it fascinating to me. I think it's a really very applied, high tech, and it's kind of uniquely an American field that we excel in. A lot of places are good at farming,
right,
but it really fits the American ingenuity and the tie-in of both capital and technology. Because you've got these farmers that are multi-million-dollar operations anymore to run a decent-sized farm, and all this technology. And the U.S. just excels in when you do things like that.
Right.
When you have to integrate both the capital and the knowledge and the technology into it, and the market systems. It just kind of, okay, man, that's an American problem. Well, let's attack that, and we'll do it.
You have to celebrate the free market for that because I don't remember what show I was watching, but it was a newscaster at the time. In one word, how would you describe America? Said efficiency. I'm like, well, But then you start to apply it to all these different levels. And in the free market, you have to be as efficient as possible. It doesn't matter what your industry is, and farming included, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're going to be a farmer in this in the market system that we have, you have to be as good as you possibly can and as efficient as you can using those things like technology, science, as far as biology and weather and all those other things. That's really, really, really interesting. So when I talk to when I was reading about you, sorry, excuse me, I also read that for a year you were into radio. Is that right? Did you have a radio show one year?
Yeah, I was at K-State. There was, at that time, they had a radio station on campus. It was KKSU, and I was the farm broadcaster for a year there, which I loved it. I really enjoyed that because it was both agriculture, which my undergrad was in, my background was in, and radio, and I enjoyed radio, and I had a blast. That was fun.
So I graduated high school in Houston, and then I went to the University of Houston. I failed out, I dropped out, and then I got an opportunity to go to Dodge City Community College for a year. And while I was at Dodge City Community College, I did the college radio station, and I parlayed that into an internship in Houston. And so I ended up working in radio for like 8 or 9 years in some fashion, right? And mainly as a morning show producer. I spent a year in Salt Lake City and Madison, Wisconsin, but kind of all over. So hearing that you did college radio, that's your kindred spirit, my friend.
Loved it. I loved it. It was so much fun.
Could you talk about the freedom of college radio for just a moment? I know you're at K-State, and I know you have you're dedicated to classes and probably doing a lot better than I ever did. But like, did you have that sense of freedom whenever you got to the college radio station?
No, it wasn't so much a sense of freedom, but it was a sense of just this is really fun. I'm getting to talk to thousands of people about something I think it's important. In that case, I was doing a lot of interviews on agriculture issues and telling people about markets, but mostly it was trying to get information that K-State had out to farmers and agriculture people about here's how to use this, here's how to do that, here's this problem. And, I just think, wow, this is really important and it's helpful. And I love doing that. And then plus there would be the people would say, "Oh, I heard you on the radio today," and I go, "Oh, well, I was on the radio today." And kind of go. There was a puffing of the chest that took place when somebody would say, "I heard you on the radio today." Oh, well,
Sure.
good. My mother did too, and that she's proud of her son.
Yeah, I could only imagine thinking about your mom and everything that you've been through, and everything you've been able to accomplish, from taking over Bob Dole and becoming a governor of Kansas and becoming an ambassador. Like, I can only imagine your mom just beams with pride every time she thinks about it. I just because I know my mom, every time I do anything, like I had, my mom sends me these little postcards that say best teacher ever, and like, all these kinds of things. So I know my mom's like silly proud of me. So I can only imagine what your mom, when she pulls you to the side or calls you once a week to tell you how proud she is of you.
Well, no, she doesn't do that. They've been
Really?
very supportive. Yeah. But for a long time, I don't think my dad in particular kind of really, and he just passed away recently, really kind of understood what I did. And he never understood politics from the standpoint of you go and you raise millions of dollars for a job that pays not even a tenth of that. What do you mean, son? You're kind of going, well, it's a different type of math, Dad. But no, they've been very supportive, and I appreciated them. More than anything, I really appreciate kind of the character that they built into us and our family. And this is about working hard and being respectful of others, and you pick a lot of that up from a hardworking farmer and a farm
Yeah.
family.
Right. And I really was on my list of things that I wanted to ask you about. Thank you for touching on that. But work ethic, the first thing you talked about is, work ethic and respect of others. You said your father just passed away recently. I apologize. You sent condolences to you for that. What did your dad, besides work ethic and respect, what other things did your dad try and instill in you when you were growing up as a kid?
About always, really being stable and being there. He was rarely gone from the farm. They came to all our kids' activities when we were children in school. They were stable. They were hardworking and frugal. You just always were working, and you couldn't spend money because the farm kind of just, you don't know when you're going to hit a bad year. And if you hit a good year, you want to sock it away or pay your debts down, because Dad was buying farmland to build the farming operation up. He bought all of it, inherited a little bit from his parents, but not much. And you see this kind of long-term steady commitment to a cause and to his family, and he just lived it. And he didn't really talk about it much. He worked until he was 86.
Good gracious.
And he had kept working past that, but his dementia just got to him, and he couldn't work anymore. But that he knew how to work and stay after it.
Yeah. So when I talked to Anna Lee about the Osawatomie when she was growing up, her and your mom graduated in 1950. And when Anna Lee was growing up, I tried to, kind of ask her a couple questions about Osawatomie. From your perspective, when you think of Osawatomie, do you think of it as like when you were growing up as a young boy, did you think of Osawatomie as like a railroad town, or did you think of it as that's where mom's from? Or how did you look at Osawatomie? What feelings does Osawatomie garner from you from when you were a kid?
Well, it was where my grandparents on mom's side were from, Nelson and Jesse Cowden. They had a little grocery store and right out there. And matter of fact, their home was on the site where the original John Brown cabin was.
Oh, wow.
On the west side there of Osawatomie. And we would go up on Sundays, and when we'd get too rambunctious as little kids, then Grandpa would say, well, why don't you, John Brown had a tunnel out from under the house in case the pro-slavery people came over. Why don't you go see if you can find that tunnel?
Yeah.
And go scooting around. Well, of course, we never did find it, but supposedly under the cabin, because the cabin itself was moved to the site where the Battle of Osawatomie took place. But the cabin itself was actually on the west side of Osawatomie. Mm-hmm. And my grandparents lived in that house that was on that property.
Wow.
I've thought about that often, because I've been involved globally on anti-human trafficking issues. I carried the first anti-human trafficking bill in the U.S. Senate when people didn't even know, what are you talking about on human trafficking? And we were saying, what's the modern day slavery? I carried bills that really dealing with freedom. I carried a freedom bill dealing with Sudan when South Sudan was splitting off from North Sudan because of the issue of slavery.
Yeah.
And, I would do those things and I would think, what a heritage I have in that my mother's from Osawatomie, Kansas, grew up on the property where Osawatomie Brown, which is what he was called at Harper's Ferry. Is that Osawatomie Brown in there?
Yeah. He called himself that too.
I didn't know that. I just know at Harper's Ferry when they were yelling in and he was shot, laying there, they say, is that Osawatomie Brown?
Yeah.
Because Osawatomie was known to fight slavery.
Wow.
And that I carried on that legacy in the anti-human trafficking movement. I carried it on in Sudan, where there was still a current issue of slavery. When I was there in the U.S. Senate, I carried the bill, the Sudan Peace Act, that addressed this issue. South Sudan voted to secede from the rest of the country, much of it off the issue of slavery. The North in Sudan is Arab. They had taken slaves in the South, which was primarily African.
Yeah.
They'd taken slaves for centuries and still were.
Wow.
And
wow. That's not something that you normally hear about. So you found yourself in a unique situation where you were able to carry on that torch of
yeah,
personal freedoms. Now, I do know recently, you may not know this, but recently they did an excavation on that property.
Oh, did they?
Yes, they did.
Did they find the tunnel?
That's the one thing I don't know. That's now that you say that, I want to go find out. But they did find evidence of the Underground Railroad being a part of this property. So that might be what they found, is a tunnel, just as evidence that the Underground Railroad went through that property. They found all sorts of artifacts and things, but the state took it. They didn't keep it in Osawatomie, so the state took it. So there's people trying to get a hold of these artifacts and things, and it's interesting because we have these we have the John Brown Museum here, the John Brown Park, and a lot of that stuff would be really nice to have here, right? Yeah. And they built what's called a ghost cabin on that property. Now, did you know about this ghost cabin?
No,
yeah, the ghost cabin is it's a replica basically of the cabin on John Brown's property on the west side off John Brown Highway. So it'd be really interesting to know if your family had sold that land to the organization that built it, or if it had been passed along and some donated. I don't know. I know nothing about this. This is why I'm doing the podcast, because I like to learn about all these things.
Yeah, I think it's probably been sold to somebody else, but I even carried, while I was in the Senate, the bill to create the African American Museum of History and Culture.
Hey,
that's a Smithsonian museum right on the mall in DC. And a lot of people would ask me kind of, well, what's your interest in this? I mean, being a Kansas senator, white guy,
yeah,
why are you interested in this? And I was going, well, my mother grew up on the property where John Brown would stay. Kansas started the fight on slavery. Kansas holds a major piece of African American history in our country. Kansas, and not all good. Brown versus Board of Education. We had separate but equal schools in Kansas.
Yeah.
But the legacy and the history of the African American community in Kansas, there's a lot of intertwining of it.
Yeah. What I really appreciate is that it's difficult because you can look at somebody's political party and start to make a whole lot of assumptions. And I appreciate this conversation because you are helping me break down a lot of assumptions. And I hope that people listening to this really understand that human beings, and we're all complex, but more importantly, we're all Americans, and we can't be pitted in the corners like we have. And so I really appreciate you speaking to that, putting together the history museum, and just the shock that somebody might have that you would be doing that. What's a white guy from Kansas is not it's not stereotypical. We're all unique. All of us are unique, and all and I appreciate you saying that.
Well, and what I find is just so often the media will categorize you, and then if you do something that plays to the stereotype, that gets lots of publicity. If you do something that doesn't play to the stereotype, they don't even cover it.
Right.
So, I mean, there wouldn't be people in Kansas that would know I carried that bill and really pushed it forward. There's another thing that Osawatomie has a major legacy piece on, and it's Native Americans.
Really?
Yeah, the Trail of Death of the Potawatomies kind of officially ended in Osawatomie. And the Potawatomies, they were eventually moved to Lynn County to a place called Sugar Valley that I've been and visited multiple times. And there was a lady canonized out of the Catholic Church off of what she did for the Potawatomies, Saint Philippine Duchesne. And this is a major, legacy piece. It was the Trail of Death. You had the Indian Removal Act in the 1830s. It was brutal. Many of these tribes were moved to Kansas. Kansas was supposed to be Oklahoma. And then the overland trails came to Kansas, and there had too many white settlers came here, so they forced all the Native Americans south into Oklahoma, other than 4 tribes that are here. And the Potawatomies were one of them that stayed. They're still north and a little west of Topeka. But there's tragedy for sure, but there's also heroism there. You have a number of Catholics that walk. You have a Catholic priest that walks the Trail of Death with them from Indiana to Kansas.
Wow.
They had a lot of people died on that, and they reenact it about every 5 years. A number of descendants of the Potawatomies reenact that Trail of Death that ended in Osawatomie, Kansas, for the Potawatomies.
That is very fascinating. That's something I did not know. I did know that Osawatomie gets its name from the Osage and Potawatomi rivers, but I did not know that the Potawatomi trail ended here.
Yeah. Wow. Now they eventually decided, well, we're not going to settle here, and they moved on south to a place it's near Farlandville, Kansas. It's just off of 7 Highway. And really, for your interest, you should go there, because there's only 2 canonized saints of the Catholic Church that spent time in the United States living. Mm-hmm. One is Seton, and the other one is Philippine Duchesne. Beautiful story of this French nun. Her and 2 other girls in France made a pact that they were going to help the Native Americans. It's getting towards the end of life for Philippine Duchesne. One of the girls has already died. The other one is an invalid, and she's the only one that's healthy enough to even go to help the Native Americans. Wow. But they made this pact as little girls, they were going to do it. So she goes from basically St. Louis, St. Charles, Missouri, up on a paddle boat to Westport in Kansas City, takes a buckboard down to Sugar Valley, Kansas, and is 70 years old. Mind you, she's 70.
No.
1838, 39, we're in that category.
That's a death sentence.
It should have been.
Yeah.
She gets there, and she's disappointed in herself, because she goes, I just really can't do much. She just doesn't have the capacity, but she can pray. And so she prays. And the Indians would come into her hut at night, and she's kneeling, and they'd put twigs and leaves on her habit to see if she would move in the night. They'd get up the next morning, and the twigs and leaves are still there on her habit. She's prayed through the night for them.
Oh, man. And
they give her this big, long Indian name that meant lady who prays all the time. Loved her. She spent only a year there. She went back to St. Charles, Missouri, feeling a failure, lives another 10 years. There's a whole bunch of schools named after her. The natives loved her, and she's now canonized saint in the Catholic Church, and one of 2 from the United States that have been here. And that happened just south of you, and where the Trail of Death ended.
Yeah, that's something so I like to take a good challenge. That's something I'm going to go do. I've been challenged on this podcast to do very few things. One being a 30-minute bike ride on the Flint Hills Trail that starts here.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. The rails to trails, I think, is a pretty interesting thing. I love they took old railroad tracks and turned it into hiking trails.
Yeah, I did that as governor, and we've got it's a 90-mile trail now, and we meant it to be like the Katy Trail in Missouri. That's a famous biking trail, and we hope it even connects someday to the Katy Trail.
Mhm.
But it's not connected yet. But yeah, you should take that.
Yeah, Dr. Dorsett in town is he's a big ambassador for the trail. Not to yeah. So I sorry for digressing, but yeah, I'm really proud of that trail. It's awesome. It's just gorgeous and it's really well maintained. I think it's awesome.
Are there people using it?
Yeah.
Good.
They hold they have bike races that start here. They have those have you know what an ultra marathon is?
No.
It's where they run like 50 or 100 miles. Yeah, like there's a marathon of 26.2, but there are people that exist in this world who are like, that's not enough. I need more. I need more running. So they go the 26.2 and they take it to 50 miles or 100 miles. Like they're called ultra marathoners. They're crazy people. No, they're not crazy. We love them. But they're crazy for running that long. But yeah, they do
that on the Flint Hills Nature Trail.
Yeah, I think there's two. There's from what I can remember, I think there's two of these big events a year for the ultra marathoners, and I think there's 2 or 3 events for bicyclists out of this town. That start off on that trail.
That is fantastic. I am so happy to hear that because I drive by the trail and I wondered, is anybody using this? Because we spent quite a bit of money as a state to get that stood up. Because one of the things Kansas needs, we just need more ways to get out in the nature and get people outside and more tourist attractions and local attractions for people to use. And so when this one came up, I was saying, that's what we need. We need a nature trail through the Flint Hills and that goes this part. And so we spent quite a bit of effort and money to get that stood up.
Yeah, I'm it's one of the things. So there's a sign. I don't know if you still drive 169 ever in your life. I don't even know where you're at now, but if you ever drive 169 outside of Osawatomie, as soon as you get here, there's a sign that says Osawatomie, City of History and Promise. And so I've been looking at this podcast in terms of the history and the promise. And you know, the trail is a piece of the promise of bringing people here because Amazon and Walmart have pretty well soaked up all the retail dollars. And so what do you do as a small town? And having that trailhead here is a great start. But just how are we as cities, citizens of Osawatomie, how are we separating ourselves and bringing in people from the outside? I mean, Kansas City's an hour away. There's 2.5 million people that can come here and experience our community. So what can we do to bring them here, and how can we offer that for them to come here? So those are the things. That's the promise, the piece that I've been working on in this podcast series.
Oh, I'm glad you're doing that because in my estimation, I look at Osawatomie as really an amazing historically significant and does have a lot of promise with its proximity to Kansas City, and tying in the history, the trail, and it's this beautiful part of U.S. history. It's a tough part, but Osawatomie was right. And they were on the right side of it. And you got Teddy Roosevelt that comes there to dedicate the park, and Barack Obama
at my gym right there.
Barack Obama is trying to kind of channel that Teddy Roosevelt progressive. When this is after Roosevelt had shifted from being kind of more of a conservative to he's trying to form a different ideology, and Obama's trying to grab that, which I don't politically agree with doing that, but I appreciate that he's in Osawatomie doing this because this is the significance of what happened in Osawatomie, Kansas.
Yeah. And kind of how funny is it to have a progressive movement come out of Osawatomie, Kansas, right? Like, it just seems like once again, where you can't judge a place, a town, or a person. You're not allowed to do it. And even though you see way different politically, that's fine. It's okay. We're all Americans, and it's an interesting thing to have two presidents come
Yes.
to Osawatomie and give a like not just a speech, but like an important one,
A
right?
major.
Maybe one Teddy Roosevelt's most important speech after his presidency was here in Osawatomie.
Yeah, it was, because he's really
Unbelievable.
trying to relaunch his brand
Mm-hmm.
at that time.
The
And
Bull Moose, is that what he called it?
yeah, Bull Moose Party.
What did
And he's,
that mean? Do you know? Because I can't figure that out.
what's that?
What does bull moose mean? I'm using you as my only person in politics that I ever I like. What was the imagery that he was trying to conjure up with that?
That he's stout, that he can take it.
Okay,
This was the Roosevelt image, was just, man, I can take on a bull moose.
okay, okay.
So it's a, it's a stout image, but these are things tied to Osawatomie, which truly just really amazing on it. The other thing that Osawatomie has that we really need so much more is mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to get a new facility built there at the Osawatomie State Hospital, and we are so short of inpatient care facilities for people with mental illnesses, and our city streets are just full anymore of people. Well, our prisons, half of the prison population in Kansas has a mental illness.
Yeah,
Half of it.
yeah,
And you're going, you did a crime, we're going to lock you up, but we need you to get care as
yeah.
well, or you're not going to get any better, and we're not going to get any better as a society with you. And Osawatomie, with the facility there, I look for the time that we really start expanding our mental health care, because we're woefully underserving, and we're basically using our prisons for mental health facilities anymore.
Right.
And that's a tragedy for the country, and it's tragedy for the people that are there.
Now, is it true? And I heard this. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't remember who said it, but after Kansas became a state, and they were so like they just granted statehood, and they were basically divvying up the cities in the state. They said that they the representative from Osawatomie and representatives from Lawrence got together, and they said one of you is going to get a state hospital, the other one's going to get the state school. And Lawrence ended up with the state school, and we ended up with the state hospital. Is that kind of how it shook out?
That's what I understand. And what I understand was Osawatomie got to pick first.
No. Got it. Okay.
But back then, a mental health facility meant a lot of jobs.
Right.
For people, and a state university was kind of, very few people went to college in that era. And it was only a few that could afford to do it. And I think they just kind of, let's take, but I don't know that that's true, but that's the way I have heard the story.
Okay.
It was basically Topeka, Lawrence, and Osawatomie were the three major anti-slavery communities in the state, and they divvied up the state capitol, the university, and the state hospital.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of neat. That's really neat. So I try and do this with my students every week. I do something called a rose, a thorn, and a seed. So the rose is the best thing that happened, the thorn is the worst thing that happened, and the seed is something that you've learned. And now I want you to kind of put yourself in the Wayback Machine and go back to your time in high school with the FFA. Can you go back and think about your time in high school as a high school student? And can you think about what was the best thing that happened in high school? What was the worst thing that happened in high school? And what's something that you learned about your time in high school?
Oh, best thing that happened in high school. It probably was, Future Farmers, and I'm graduating or soon to graduate, and I'm elected state president of the Future Farmers of Kansas. And cool. That really gave me a launch. That'd probably have to be the biggest significant thing on a long-term basis that happened to me. Uh, the thorn, it's kind of hard to pick a thorn because I had a wonderful growing up. I had a wonderful high school experience.
Yeah.
Um, I probably the thorn was just uh, the nature of being a teenager. You just got so many crazy different ideas in your head, and your thinking portion hadn't really developed. And I'd have a lot of crazy thoughts, and sometimes up and sometimes down, and just that emotional nature would probably be the thorn.
Yeah.
And the seed of all of it, I think, is just that. Yeah, I'm a person of faith. I just see God's hand in all of it.
Mm.
I was reading a book one time a friend sent me about Winston Churchill, and about him looking back on his life as just that he could see the hand of destiny working throughout much of his life. And I just see that in my life, that the Lord has really shaped things. Even from the guy where I got my name. I'm Sam.
Yeah.
I was a guy that caught a bass, a big fish, in the Miami County lake, and his picture was in the newspaper, and his name was Sam. And my parents didn't know what to name me, and they looked and they go, "Oh, well, let's name him Sam."
That's
And I love
that's a
my
great
name.
story.
There are very few Sams around. Actually, it
Yeah.
was a pretty uncommon name for being such a typical name.
Did they go with Samuel, or did they
Yeah,
officially it's Sam?
I'm Samuel. I'm Samuel
Okay.
Day. But I've always gone by Sam, and
Right.
I look back on just the divine hand of the great opportunity to be born in America, in a rural setting, work on a farm, stable parents, building a family, hardworking, instilling values. I was set up for success.
Yeah.
And I just continue to see that divine providence and grace that has been such a blessing to me and to my family. And it's one of those things, you can't see it looking forward, but you can see it when you look back.
Yeah.
And all those things that happened to you. Why did I get the ag teacher that I did, that was knowledgeable, and why did he see talent in me to put me on forward, and why did I grab it? You kind of, all these little things that add up, and then later on I get to be a United States senator, and I'm raised on a small, mostly livestock, but pigs were our biggest thing that we had on our farm. And I'm just, thank you, God.
Yeah. Just for just because I don't know that I'll ever have another opportunity to talk to you, so I want to ask. You took over for Bob Dole's seat in the Senate. Did you ever have an opportunity to sit down and work with him or talk to him in any way?
I did a lot.
And
I knew
how is he as a man? How would you describe Bob Dole?
I is great. I love Bob Dole.
Yeah.
He just, he loved his country. He was a patriot through and through. He was hardworking as person as you could ever find. He always stayed up to date and had kind of a real sense of America. He just could really feel the country. And when you're this is a representative democracy,
Right.
and everybody's polling all the time. So you've got data from polls, but a lot of times, people, they'll tell you one thing, but they're really not, they're really thinking something a little different. He had as good a sense of a feel, particularly for his generation and Kansas, that I think anybody I've ever seen. And that's an intuitive, politically extremely valuable, but it's intuitive. It's part of the art of politics, not the science of it. And he was great at it.
Yeah.
I thought when he died, that was kind of a big part of the closing of the chapter on the greatest generation for our nation. And he was the iconic figure of the greatest generation. He was it.
Yeah, I talk about I talking to Anna Lee about, you know, what happened during World War II when she was, I mean, she was your mom included. So I'm saying this in a perspective of talking about your mom, but she would have to go get you know, ration books and to go get, you know, sugar and flour. It was a total war in the war during World War II. And that was right up till 6th grade. I mean, they didn't get a 6th grade picture in the yearbook because, you know, they couldn't spend money on it, you know, and so it's just interesting things like that. And like that generation is like, those stories they're fleeting. I mean, and they have been for 20 years. Those stories have been fleeting. And, you know, just hearing you know, somebody like your mom or Anna Lee talk about having to wait in line to get a loaf of bread with a book of stamps is just, you know, that just those kind of stories about, you know, what kind of sacrifices they had to make during that war, but doing it knowing that they were doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Knowing
they weren't complaining, and
right.
nobody cut in line. I mean, it was just kind of, okay, this is what we got to do. They're very patriotic.
Absolutely.
Thank you. This has been it's been fun. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. And thank you for your interest in your adopted hometown.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
I'm
where
glad
my
to-
kids grow up, so I got to take the most interest possible. So thank you so much. It was really nice talking to you. Thank you very, very much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Take care now.
Bye-bye.